Bolatito. Bolatito was an excited graduate. After hard work and perseverance, she had finally completed her degree. She had big dreams and looked forward to stepping out into the world to accomplish all of them. At 23 years old, she was focused, goal-oriented, and prepared for her next phase in life. Sadly, on the day of her graduation ceremony, a night that was meant to be filled with joy and rejoicing ended in tragedy and shame. This is Bolatito's story. The club was fully packed that night as Bolatito made her way in, clinging to her boyfriend's arm. There was no better way to celebrate her graduation than a fun night out with her significant other. After both of them got into the club, they sat by the bar to order some drinks. Dari looked admirably at Bolatito, his woman. "You look so beautiful and I'm absolutely proud of you." He leaned over to give her a kiss on the cheek. She smiled sweetly at him, feeling complete. She had known long ago that Dari was the one for her. She knew that they would be married and spend the rest of their lives together. It was only a matter of time. She knew it. He was absolutely perfect. He was earning good money as a petroleum engineer and he had a house of his own. He was also so loving and supportive. They had been dating for 3 years now and it was certainly a dream come true. She had her entire life planned out. She would work as a manager in a reputable company and run a business on the side. Dare even promised to support her financially. Everything was well planned out in her head. Little did Bolatito know that that night in the club would threaten to end that dream and invoke a never-ending nightmare. Dari and Bolatito had been in the club for a total of 1 hour, downing some tequila and singing along to the music playing in the background. As they continued to have fun, Bolatito spotted her best friend Caroline on the dance floor. She quickly made her way over to where she was. Caro, babe, I thought you were not feeling well. Why are you in the club? See, you know me now. I can't stay away from this for too long, Caroline replied. Both girls laughed. Caroline was an adventurous young woman and what most would consider wild in Nigeria. She was not in a steady relationship but was steadily entangled in one situation or the other. Oftentimes, she would even foster relationships with wealthy married men. Bolatito would try her best to dissuade Caroline from such relationships, but mostly to no avail. Still, Caroline was her confidant and most trusted friend. She knew Caroline would ride for her and have her back no matter the situation. As Bolatito and Caroline continued talking, a big-looking man came to where they were. He wrapped his arm around Caroline's waist and began to whisper in her ear. Bolatito took this as a cue to leave. "Bye," she said to Caroline, as the man continued to grab hold of her and whisper in her ear. Bolatito went back to Dari, who was now talking with some of his male friends. "Caro don't ditch me for man, no," she said to him. Dari laughed. "You've seen it now." "Babe, I need to go help Eli. He called and said he's having some car troubles. Max, 1 hour. I'll be back, okay?" Dari said, picking up his phone and wallet from the counter. 1 hour, will come back quick," Bolatito replied. He gave her a kiss on the cheek and soon he was out with another guy. Caroline seemed to appear from nowhere. "Babe, where is your boyfriend going now?" She had 2 drinks in her hand. "He's going to help Eli with his car. Said he will be back in like an hour. Come, you this girl. Who is that guy that was holding you like that? I haven't seen him before." "That's my guy, you. You haven't met him before, but forget him, Joe. I brought us some drinks." Caroline handed Bolatito one of the drinks in her hand. They both jammed their glasses together and dunked down their drinks in excitement. That was the last drink Bolatito would have that night. After Bolatito had taken her drink, she continued to party with Caroline. About 20 minutes later, she started to feel funny. Everywhere began to look hazy. At first, she thought she was tired or maybe a little drunk, but it actually started to worsen. She felt faint in her limbs. As she turned around, she realized that Caroline was nowhere to be found. She tried to walk to a nearby chair, but her legs gave way. She almost landed on the ground, but a strong, firm hand grabbed her. She turned to see who it was and saw that it was the same big man that had wrapped his arm around Caroline earlier. She had an eerie feeling about him immediately, but she felt trapped in her body. Something was terribly wrong, and she really could not move and could barely speak. Caroline, she managed to mutter. She soon realized that this man was actually carrying her somewhere, and nobody around seemed to notice anything out of the ordinary. In the blink of an eye, she found herself propped on a bed in one of the private rooms in the club. She kept passing out and coming to again and again. At different times, she would see different men walking into the room, and she would feel them touching her. She would feel sharp pains, but she was nearly lifeless and could do nothing to fight or even scream. At some point, she completely passed out. Dari had returned an hour 30 minutes later than he had initially promised and was soon searching for Bolatito. He tried calling her phone severally but no answer. He then called Caroline. She picked up. "Hello, I'm Caroline. How are you? Please, I'm looking for tea. Have you seen her?" I left her in the club and I went home. Seems like she was having mad fun and didn't want to leave. I'm home now. Have you tried calling her?" "Yes, I have." "Okay, let me look for her," Dari said. "Okay, please keep me posted. I'm sure she's around there. Nothing to worry about." "Okay, no problem, thanks." Dari hung up the phone with a dreaded feeling in his chest. He knew this was unlike her, not to keep in touch with him if she left the club, so he continued to search for her inside the club. As he checked the washrooms and the bar areas, he came across the private room, which was not so obvious. As he drew nearer to the door, he began to suspect that something was wrong. He slowly pushed the door open and found Bolatito sobbing alone on the bed. He could see small traces of blood on the bed, and immediately he knew what had happened to her. At first, he stood frozen, trying to process what had happened and secretly hoping it was some kind of prank or joke. Soon, he realized this was very real. He rushed to her. She didn't even notice that he was standing at the door, and when he touched her, she immediately recoiled, not realizing it was him. "It's me, Dari. It's me." She was so weak and distraught. She couldn't even walk. Dari had to carry her out of the place. Eyes watched as he carried her out. He frantically put her in the back seat of his car and immediately began to drive her to the hospital. 3 days after the incident, Bolatito laid in the hospital. In those 3 days, she had been visited by family and a small group of her close friends who heard what happened to her, but no sign of Dari or Caroline. On the 4th day, her doctor decided to discharge her from the hospital with some prescribed medication. "Bolatito," Dr. Vashti said with deep pity in her eyes, "you should consider getting psychological help. We have done the best for you here, but you need some counseling and help. People in these kinds of situations need this kind of help to get them through this traumatic experience." Bolatito heard what she said, but her mind was distant from her words. "Okay, ma. Thank you." She grabbed the prescription from her and headed for the door, where her mother was waiting for her. It was mostly a silent car ride back home. Somehow, it seemed like Bolatito could perceive her mother's thoughts. "I told her not to go to the clubs. Now look what has happened. If she hadn't gone there now, would this have happened?" The silence said more than actual words being spoken. When they got to the house, it was unusual. Bolatito's elder sister Niola was there. Niola worked in Port Harcourt as a banker. She rarely had any time to come home to Lagos because of the nature of her job, but here she was. Everyone had a look of pity in their eyes. As they gazed at Bolatito, everyone was there. Her dad, her mom, her brother, her sister, and her closest cousin, Stephen. Dari was not there. She turned to her mother and finally spoke. "Mommy, what's up, Dari? I haven't heard from him. I've been trying to call him, but his number is not going through." "I don't know, my darling. Come and rest. We'll talk about that later." She had a strong feeling that she was about to receive another traumatic blow, and she was right. It took another week for Bolatito to see Dari again. He finally came to the house to see her. Bolatito didn't know how to feel when she saw him. There was a long silence as both of them just stared at each other, wondering what each other was thinking. The rest of the household had excused the both of them as they both sat in the living room drenched in silence. Dari finally spoke up. "How are you, T?" She completely ignored his question. "Where have you been, Dari? It's been 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks. I haven't heard from you." Silence. "Dari, say something. How could you just abandon me like that? How could you leave me alone at a time like this? I called everyone. No one could give me answers as to why you've been MIA. Dari, talk to me. What is going on?" Dari finally broke his silence. "It's too much for me, okay? It's too much. I can't handle this." Bolatito stood there in complete disbelief. "I was raped. Not you. Me." She began to cry. "And you're telling me that is too much for you to handle?" Dari tried to move closer to her, but she pulled back very sharply. "Try to understand. I don't know what to do. Things can never be the same between us after this. I don't know, T. It's just too much for me right now. How could you be so heartless, Dari? How could you think of yourself in this moment? How selfish can you be? The time when I needed you the most, you bailed on me. You abandoned me. And now you're telling me this. Please leave." Dari tried once again to move closer to her. "Leave!" she yelled. Dari paused and quietly made his way to the door. Before he left, he turned around to speak to her again. One final word. "Haven't you even thought about how you got into the situation? How everything happened?" "What are you talking about?" Bolatito replied. "Have you heard from Caroline since the incident?" For a second, Bolatito realized that she had actually not spoken with Caroline since the whole incident. She had been so wrapped up in contacting Dari that she forgot that she had not seen or heard from Caroline. "Can't you see, T? I warned you about her. She's not your friend. She planned with those guys. She drugged you and had them do what they did to you." Bolatito stood there in disbelief, staring intensely at Dari. "No one knows where she is now. She has gone underground." "I'm sorry, T. I'm so sorry," he said. He then opened the door and left. It all made sense now. She started to patch together the fragmented memories from that night. She remembered that it was Caroline who gave her the drink and how she later disappeared and was nowhere to be found. She remembered hearing one of the guys talk on the phone and say, "Caro, we don't finish you." She began to breathe heavily. A wave of dread and pain began to overwhelm her. Caroline did this to her. Caroline partnered with other people to destroy her life. She couldn't subdue the pain at this moment. She began to wail very loudly, crawling to the floor, looking for something to hold on to. Her wailing was so loud that everyone in the house quickly rushed to the living room to find her alone and in complete distress. The only words that kept repeating, "Caroline, Caroline." It was now 6 months since Bolatito was gang raped by 3 different men in the private room of a nightclub. She was no longer the same person. Multiple attempts had been made to bring the culprits to book. Several lawsuits had been filed, but all to no avail. Even the hospital provided proof that she was raped, but the court did nothing to investigate further into the issue. One court official actually said, "Why were you in the nightclub in the first place? Young girls of these days, You see what you have done to yourself? She had heard of the culture of victim blaming in many rape cases in Nigeria, but she never thought it would happen to her. She never thought that she would ever be in this situation. Dari had called off their relationship just 2 days after they last saw each other, and she had not heard from him since. In fact, Dari wasn't the only one silent. As for Caroline, nobody had seen or heard from her. It was like she just disappeared from the face of the earth. It was all very overwhelming for Bolatito, but with the help and support of friends and family, she was trying the best she could to pick up her life again. She lived in continuous and desperate fear. Unable to move around the city on her own, she always required company. She felt completely crippled and helpless. Life seemed empty. She seemed only to lose and continue losing. One Friday morning, she was alone in the house. She heard her phone ring and picked it up. It was an old coursemate, Olumide. Olumide was formerly interested in her. He had made several advances, but she turned him down because of her relationship with Dari. "Hello?" Bolatito answered. "Hello, is this Bola?" He sounded almost cheerful and suspiciously so. "Hello, yes, this is Bolatito. Olumide, is that you?" "Yes, so it's me, Olumide. It's been a long time. How are you, Bola?" She never liked being called Bola, but she obliged him. I'm fine, Olumide. How are you?" I'm fine. He paused. Bola, I heard what happened to you. I ran into Dari a few days ago. He told me what happened." Bolatito immediately felt a deep heaviness in her heart. How many people knew about this? How far had this story traveled? She was silent. "Dari is getting married on Saturday to one Elizabeth." He paused again, expecting to incite a reaction from her. He continued, "You see, if you had agreed to be with me, all this would not have happened to you. I would have protected you. But see now, see what has happened. I loved you, but you refused. Now see." Bolatito could not believe what she was hearing. She couldn't believe that Olumide called her to mock her, to remind her of her already deep in anguish. She couldn't make out the words that he spoke any longer as he continued to speak over the phone. She hung up the phone on him, switched it off, and stared into the ceiling. In that silence, she could hear very overpowering voices telling her that her life was over. She had heard them subtly before, but now it seemed stronger than ever. She had no power to fight them off. She felt an overwhelming drive to end everything. She walked to the drug cabinet and sporadically began to take several pills all at once, not minding what they were. In the space of 5 minutes, she had swallowed close to 20 different pills. Within minutes, everything went black and she was down on the floor. Bolatito had been lying on the floor for a total of 10 minutes after swallowing all those pills. No one else was home. She was alone. She could feel herself slipping away, falling into another dimension. She didn't know exactly where she was anymore, but it seemed like she was like air. She could see her body on the floor, and immediately she was transported somewhere else. It was a dark place. She could feel something pulling her, tugging at her, trying to take her away. It was stronger than her and she could not fight it off. She began to give up. At the last second, when she was being dragged off, something happened. She felt someone hold her right hand. Immediately this happened, the dark force trying to pull her away let her go. It seemed to tremble in dread and utter fear as this other person who held her hand appeared. As she turned to see who this person was, she heard him say, "Bolatito, arise." Immediately she heard that word, she returned to her body in her living room. She didn't really understand what had happened to her. As a matter of fact, she no longer felt any nausea or side effects from the pill she had taken. Some unexplainable peace had entered into her heart and seemed to fill the entire room where she laid. She tried to understand what exactly happened. There was silence in the room. The voices that had been prompting her to end her life were now quiet, as though a greater presence had forced them not to speak to her anymore. In that bare silence, she heard the name Jesus echo in her heart repeatedly. That was the person who took her hand and said those words to her. That was the person who quieted the dark voices. That was the person who helped her. She was raised a Christian like most Nigerian children, but to say that she actually knew who Jesus was, that she knew him personally, was a lie. She knew people had tried in the past to tell her about him, but as most, she ignored him, feeling like she liked her life the way it was. But now, in this dark time, when all that she held dear and loved had forsaken her, why would Jesus help her? After all, she had rejected him in the past. Why would he come to her rescue when even Dari, the person she loved and trusted, abandoned her? These questions surrounded her mind, and she needed to know more. She needed to understand who Jesus really was. A few days after her encounter with Jesus, Bolatito was left with the need to know more about him. The only place she could think of starting was by asking her auntie, who always tried to tell her about Jesus. She called her up on the phone in the afternoon. It rang only a few times. Hello? Auntie Biodun, good afternoon. Bolatito, good afternoon, my dear. How are you? Longest time. I'm fine, auntie. How are you? How's your family? Everything is fine, love. I hope everyone is doing okay. Oh. Yes, they are, Bolatito responded softly. There was a momentary silence. Hello? Bolatito? Are you still there? Auntie, can you please tell me more about Jesus? Auntie Biodun was silent for a minute, taken by surprise at the question. Well, Auntie Biodun started. God came in the form of a man, Jesus, into a world filled with broken people, sin, pain, death. Jesus was pure and holy, but he carried our sin, our brokenness, our pain on himself, and died for us so that we wouldn't be or bear any of these things. He did all that so that we would have life. Bolatito had heard the gospel before, but hearing it now, it sounded different, more real, more resonating. She started to feel a desperate pull to Jesus, the same person who had saved her and brought her back to life. She was ready to let him in. She didn't know fully what it would entail, but somehow she knew it was the right thing to do. Auntie, she said, I would like to give my heart to Jesus. And just like that, Auntie Biodun led Bolatito to pray a simple prayer. Lord Jesus, come into my life today. I believe that you died and resurrected. I accept you into my heart. I confess that you are the Son of God. Come and be Lord over my life. Amen. And a strong wave of peace rested in her heart once she made that decision. She knew that the pain, the shame, and the dark voices had been taken away, and she was washed clean and made new. It was time to begin a new life with new hope and new expectations.